Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Leche We Are podcast. I'm Eddie Pabon, aka Mr. Light and Love, here to bring you another episode of pure love, energy, community, healing, and empowerment. We always have amazing people on our podcast, but today is going to be a little extra special for me because this takes me back to my childhood roots. Our guest today is a veteran in the game of mental health. He's Latino, which for me, as a Latino, is like hits home. And he's a beautiful soul filled with so much light and love. So I want you all to give a warm welcome. Bring your love, bring your energy, bring your vibes, questions, comments to Dr. Luis Laviena, the psicólogo extraordinary. Let me bring him on. How you doing?
Eddie Pavon, I'm so glad to be sharing this time with you and with the audience.
The pleasure is mine, my brother. Thank you for making time out for little old me and Leche.
Listen, you're doing God's work, man.
Yeah,
You're
thank
doing
you.
God's
So
work.
are you. We are soul brothers in that aspect. So, Laviena, for those of us who don't know you, and most of these young kids probably tuning into this podcast don't know you. I know you from seeing you on the TV when I was a little kid, right? And knowing that I had a special interest in mental health, I always took interest in people like you, right? Like sort of model figures for where I wanted to be in life when I got older. So thank you for being successful and for modeling what it looks like to be a Latino in the spotlight, right? But tell people who you are. What do you do? What is your specialty? Where are you from? Let them know.
Well, soy de Puerto Rico. I'm from Puerto Rico, and from New York, of course. It's like it's like living room, dining room, Puerto Rico, New York, and it's. I grew up between two cultures, as a lot of Latinos do. And I believe I was the first Latino in mental health to be on TV. So this is how long it was. I was very young.
He's a legend, yo. I'm not going to ask you how old you are. I'm not going to ask you.
Well, I was very young, which was interesting because at the time there was this whole thing about you needed to be older in order to talk about the things that we talked. But then there was like nobody out there. Nobody wanted to do media because of all the issues that have changed. Because right now, the incorporation of people, the fact that we are accessible, the fact that we can be transparent, what you're doing is wonderful. I mean, you're reaching people that otherwise wouldn't be reached. So it was a big, big, big challenge at the time. I started, my God, it was 1980, with little spots, doing little comments here and there, comments about news, comments about things that happened. And that little by little started growing. And as you remember, when you were a kid, we would have like a weekly spot where we talked a little bit about mental health issues, and in particular, mental health issues in the Latino community, which was a big taboo because at the time, Latinos saw going or talking about mental health issues as you were gone, you were lost. Al psicólogo vas si estás loco. You're crazy. Then psychologist. You don't talk about your problems. La ropa sucia se lava en casa. Dirty clothes you wash in your home.
Folks become Latinos. I don't know about any other folks of color, right? And I'm sure that this applies to a lot of people because we internalize things, right? And we make it about our culture because that's what we know. But in all actuality, these are issues that people of color, people, even, blanquitos, white people, we all face these things as humans. Coming from families of like, do as I say, not as I do. Don't do that, right? And definitely don't talk about the big, giant, pink fucking elephant that we have in the middle of the room that is our drama as family. You keep that shit here.
And why do you do that? Because I said so.
That's right.
Wait a minute. It's like, really? So it was a time of questioning, and there was a time of challenge. I mean, I remember, having the hardest time even getting the shows to discuss a little further about issues like racism, issues like homosexuality, issues that had to do with like mixed couples, issues that had to do with HIV. I mean, in the 80s, it was the whole, HIV epidemic and the pandemic, and people refused to even mention the name on TV. So we used to sneak it on TV, and they would bleep us. They would bleep us. These are the days they would bleep us and tell us this is how you have to call it. So it's been a long, long road. Uh, and again, I think that we all have a duty of doing what we can, and the duty to listen, and
Yes.
and the duty to think, because part of the problem is a lot of these things come from time and culture. And when I say culture, I'm not talking about a country, but the home culture of people not allowing you to think, not
Yes.
allowing you to be an independent thinker.
This is important for any parents that are listening, right? Who are
Yes.
trying to be optimal in their efficiency and parenting their children to be the best human beings that they can be. You must let your child fall. Be there for them to pick them up, to help them get up. But let
Exactly.
them feel what it's like to know, experience that is life. Nothing is hand given. Nothing is, bubbly and Disney and Santa like we like
Mhm.
to teach our kids, and we set them up as a result for huge disappointments, for huge trauma, right? Because you go from this bubbly, magical la la land of things that you're taught into this really harsh reality.
You hit it right in the head. That's absolutely right, and it's so frustrating, and it kind of throws people off of their path when people are growing and they grow up in a world where adults have all the truth and they say all the right, and you're not entitled to
You're
make
voiceless.
or to question or to do these things. And you and I know, that, which is so true. It's like there's nothing more empowering than allowing yourself to make a mistake and correct it. you
Yes.
know
You learn from mistakes.
But
Mistakes
of
are okay,
course,
they're a
of
part of the
course,
human experience.
I used to tell parents all the time. Parents who say like, "Oh, but I can't say this. I can't tell my kid about my mistakes." I say, you know what? Your kids are going to look up to you because they will see your human side,
Absolutely.
and that is, in spite of your human side, you go ahead. That
Someone
makes you
said
more
here,
powerful.
it does, someone said here it's a strange power dynamic. It is, right? Because as parents, we're taught, do as I say, not as I do when we're growing up,
Yes,
and then we go and we regurgitate that because that's all we know, right?
exactly.
So bless our parents' hearts for doing the best that they could with the
Yeah.
stuff that they were handed and trying to do the best with us, right? So we sort of mimic that. But
Hmm.
what we should be doing is trying to create a newfound system of openness, nurturing, and supporting unconditional love, right? This is
Sure.
playing a role instead of authentically being human. Yes, this is
Yes.
important. Someone says, right? Because we're in a society full of actors, full of people who are trying to pretend to be something that they're not, and as a result, they suffer from imposter syndrome. They suffer from insecurity. They suffer from anxieties and depressions because they're not living their true soul's purpose, right?
Exactly.
So people like Dr. Laviena, other way, um, he's here to sort of help you figure this shit out, right? Because everything is an experience. I think it's a mental projection. This is how I look at life. Everything is your perspective projected onto the mapping that is the world. And
Sure.
if your baseline mapping includes your inability to have an opinion, to be vocal about your feelings, or to talk about actual issues that exist, then what you do is you suppress this stuff and you find yourself feeling at odds with the reality, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that
Definitely.
manifests in different ways. I call it energy blockage. The psych might call it depression, may call it, trauma.
You're
um
right on the money.
yeah.
Right on the money. It's funny. I remember, if I could remember a phrase or a question that I used every day of the decade of the 80s was, when was the last time that you acknowledged that you made a mistake?
Mm.
And you know what? Like 97% of people couldn't tell me a date, because if they made a mistake, you needed to hide it,
Yep.
you needed to justify it, you needed to put this whole thing, and there was an internal battle that the only person who lost was the person who was hiding it,
Yeah.
because You know, you make a mistake, you figure it out, you go to the next step, you get help if you need. There's all the stuff out there that you're depriving yourself just because you're not acknowledging the place where you are.
Yes, and some of the people who, we tend to associate mistakes with being inefficient or
Right.
something personal to us, right? And I
Right.
have something to tell you with your narcissistic perspective about that. Not you, but the person who is feeling this,
Uh-huh.
that you are not alone in this human experience, right?
Sure.
Everyone makes mistakes, whether it's the first time you try to walk or the first time you try to pronounce something, right? You always make mistakes, but mistakes are the learning path. They're a part of success. And the biggest misperception is that if you make mistakes, you're a failure. Some of the most successful people have made the most mistakes.
Of
They have
course.
put themselves out there to try things, and then when they failed, quote unquote, because failures are perspective,
Hmm.
then they learned and dissected what went wrong, and then reapproached the situation and tailored the approach to those things so that they could alleviate any failure in the future. What you find is success.
Sure. Sure.
Right?
Sure. And there's another side of this, is that a lot of people, as they progress in life, what they do is they try to put out of their life those people who either point at their mistakes or tell them the truth. And that's where you see the biggest failures in life. When you see people, like, for example, I used to deal, like in the 90s, I dealt with a lot of people in show business that had like big names and all this stuff, surrounded themselves with what I call yay sayers. All they
Yep.
said,
People who just say yes because the
yes,
money's
yeah,
there and the power's
yes,
there. Yeah.
yes, yes. And these people would get themselves into a place that it was so shallow and so lost. Some of the biggest internal pain that I saw in people was not in people who were hungry, was not in people who were poor, but was in people who had money and power in a way, but they didn't have somebody to tell them, dude, you can't wear that. Or you can't do that. You can't have another plastic surgery. You
Mm.
can't, this is a little too much.
No,
Think,
but it's relevant
yes.
because a lot of times, even as poor people, and most of us, 99% of the world, right, fits that category.
Mhm.
Then you find yourself like wishing that you were in another place, wishing that you had money. Then you make money, right? You find yourself in these positions of power, and you feel more lost than ever, more
Yes,
empty than
yes,
ever. You
yes.
have a lot of things, but internally, you never did the work, right? You
Exactly.
externalized your happiness. And so that when you do that, you require something constantly to be happy.
Right,
When you have everything and there's
right,
nothing left to acquire, if
right.
you never did the work internally, you'll find yourself with yourself,
Yeah,
by yourself,
yeah.
going through shit storms. Right? So like it's interesting because we were just talking about this before we went live, and that was this whole COVID experience and this whole like everyone
Yes.
being with themselves. What is that? What are you seeing from the psych end, right, with your clients or from people when they have to face themselves, when they're no longer able to externalize their happiness like they were pre-COVID?
Exactly. We have seen like a big, big, huge explosion of different aspects of depression and of anxiety at the two extremes,
Mm-hmm.
depression and anxiety, because of simple things that you would say, well, you're 30 years old, you probably should have dealt with this when you were 15. But in reality, you didn't, because you set yourself on the path that you never questioned, you never put these things. Now you have all this time in your hands and you have the isolation. So, what comes to your head? All those unresolved things
Mm.
that even if you try to push them aside, you can only push them aside so much because they keep on bumping on you.
Yep.
So people begin to fall into this spiral of either drinking, either doing drugs.
Poor coping mechanisms.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly. All they're doing is trying to medicate and mitigate those things that you didn't face in a particular time, that now they're knocking at your door constantly.
Mm.
So it's important for people to make yourself and structure your time so that you include the things that you need to do, but also include time for yourself. Trying to look at yourself naked, and I'm not talking about clothing, but I'm talking about naked as you are, your being. What hurts me, what I like, what I don't like, what is my beef with the people outside, what is my beef with my family, what is my beef with my kids, what is my
And
beef with my
yeah,
wife, my
and you'll find
husband.
that a lot of those beefs, a lot of those dramas that you have absolutely nothing to do with these people. They
Yes.
started out with that. This is
Yes.
really just a mirror reflection of your uncomfortability with some sort of stimuli. Something's happening that
Yeah.
is causing you to react, and instead of you noticing your reaction, right? Which I think we do the same thing in different aspects. We teach people how to notice themselves, how to be comfortable with themselves, how to practice different techniques that may work for different individuals depending on who you are, to address that uncomfortability, that energy blockage, that depression, anxiety,
Sure.
past traumas. I've worked in counseling for a while, not in a not in a psychologist perspective, but as a substance abuse counselor, working
Hmm.
with people who have poor adaptive coping skills, and have really not faced themselves. They were hid behind a substance for many years.
Sure.
So I totally get what it's like to sort of face people and have to put the mirror in front of them,
Right.
which makes people really uncomfortable and can make you the bad guy sometimes too,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes. Because people, some people are uncomfortable with looking at themselves because they never have. And the thing is that doesn't matter how good or bad you are, unless you face yourself, you're not going to get better. You're just going to keep on throwing mud into your image.
Mhm.
And I used to play a game. I remember I used to call it peel the onion. It's like every time you ask why, you peel one layer of the onion until you get to the center. And it was funny because you could take anything, and by 9 questions, by 9 whys, the finger turns up to you. Somebody could start talking about, like, my family's horrendous, da, 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 this and that, and that might be true. But then you begin to say why, and little by little, the finger begins to turn around. So by the
Because
seventh,
they said,
eighth
and then
why,
I
it's like
said,
it's
right? Uh huh.
because either I allowed it, I never questioned it, I decided to buy what they told me. So it turns to you. So unless you play those 7 whys, you're going to be keeping at bay of the real center of the problem, because it doesn't matter how bad your family is. It doesn't matter how bad your neighborhood is. It doesn't matter how bad people are. If you don't deal with yourself, everything starts with yourself. You're
Absolutely.
the agent of change.
Mm.
You're the one who needs to do the first thing, because you're the pillar. Yeah.
Yep, you are the solution.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What made you want to study mental health? What made you want to get into being a psychologist?
Okay, I'm gonna say this, and my family's gonna kill me. But my
It's
family,
usually the
I had
family of
the
origin.
craziest family in the world. It's, I grew up in a household that had people from different cultures. So let's start by that. Who had, like, in a whole acculturation that was very different from one or another, living in the same place. Let's start with that.
Mhm.
My parents and my immediate family, I was an only child, but I have an extended family. I was lucky that my grandparents, I got to see my grandparents, I got to see my great grandparents. I have one side of my family that lived into the hundreds.
Wow.
So I think it was a blessing, because I got to see different perspective of people who survived terrible things. I remember talking to my great grandparents about the whole epidemic, talking about COVID, about the flu epidemic of 1918, telling me about wearing masks and all that stuff, telling me about that
Wow.
that happened like 100 years ago. So
History tends to repeat itself.
yes, yes, and that kind of began to give me another perspective. I was like, you know what? It's like, in reality, is this so new, or are we just repeating it because we didn't learn from the last time? That was
Mhm.
one of the questions I always, like, kept in my head. Also, the fact that there were different perspectives, because they took it as the truth. My grandfather thought he had the truth, so that my grandmother, so that my other grandfather, so that my other and I would say, but wait a minute. these truths are so different one from the other. They can't all be the truth, you
You
know?
know what's funny? The truth is really relevant to your perspective, right?
Exactly,
So we were
exactly.
talking about this the other day, and I wanted to bring this up with you and see what you thought about it. But we were talking about generational influence, and one of the things that came up was like the belief systems that were passed down to us as kids.
Well,
One of them was being left-handed or
uh,
right-handed,
my
right?
God, yes.
And the belief, I don't know about any other cultures, but as I speak for Latinos, right?
Mhm,
Puerto Ricans
mhm,
specifically, because I identify as Puerto Rican.
mhm.
We were told, I was told that as a lefty, lo de izquierda no se va pa el cielo, right? I think it's the
That's right.
saying.
You go
So
to hell.
left-handed people don't go to heaven. Apparently, I was the devil. I was influenced by the devil because I was a left-handed person. And some people have had, my mother fortunately never, she did say it to me because she was a Bible, uh,
Hmm.
caring woman, but she didn't ever tell me like, you're doomed. She just like, they say that, Poppy, but it's
Yes,
not
yes.
true,
And it's not only Latinos. I mean, let me tell you, I thought a part of my family are Italian, and you know the name. The right hand is diestra.
Okay.
This is siniestra, sinister. So if
Oh,
you're lefty, you're sinister. You're like dark and weird and doing bad things. So even the names of things were associated with kind of darkness and evilness and being tricky and all this stuff, when
yeah.
in reality it's part of nature. It is part of
It's not only part of nature, but from a psychological perspective or just from a mental health perspective, I can't even imagine what it was like. I was lucky to have a mom who was like, yeah, they say that, but you just got to be a good person,
right, right, right.
But for those kids who, for example, when we were talking about it, one of the kids said that his mother used to tie his hand to the table, and he wasn't allowed to use his left hand, and the family would really obsess about it, like you can't, you're gonna go to hell, like, and
I remember hearing stories of people that in school they wouldn't allow them to use their left hand, that they had to practice hours and hours and hours with the right hand because the teachers would not allow them to do that. As a matter of fact, I think it wasn't until the 60s or something like that that they began to liberalize that and allow kids to do that. But it was a common practice that was corrected. Like if it was like a disability, you
And
be
imagine what that tells someone about themselves, right?
sure,
Something very natural about you is unnatural.
sure, sure.
And you shouldn't be comfortable with that. And it's a problem. And it's a
Yes,
real problem.
yeah.
Like something that school, home, everybody is against. So your belief system gets developed around the reality that you are flawed. And I can't imagine how many children grew up in that generation just by the basis of being left handed. We're not adding any other details into this, folks. Life gets very intricate and deep. But how many of you, and you can comment on this if you identify, thought you were going to go to hell because you're left handed or because you're gay, right? Lesbian, bisexual, um, because you're exploring your human condition? How many of you felt guilty for that? Why did you feel guilty for that? I invite you, I'm sure Lewis does as well, to question why you have so much self hate centered around certain things about yourself. Where did that come from? There is gold, there is diamonds waiting for you in that
Sure.
insight.
Most definitely, most definitely. Because I mean, it's like it's just not one mold. It's not one mold. There are many molds, and the molds keep on multiplying because as we live, we discover more things into ourselves, and
Yep.
those things are the ones that are going to actually open our path to the future. Because thank God for acceptance that we've been able to kind of like move away from those. Think about it. It's like a couple of years ago, people looked like if it was the end of the world, if you had two people of different race getting together, if you had, two people of the same sex walking hand to hand. Um,
It
I
still happens. We're still going through that struggle, right?
listen, the whole adoption issue. I remember in 1981 going to a hospital in Manhattan in 100th Street. So you might know which one is it.
Okay, 100th
Going
Street.
to the basement. there were over 600 babies that had no parents because of the drug infestation at the time. And those kids were not allowed to be given into homes because if people weren't white, married, they wouldn't have even a chance to apply to have one of those kids. So those kids grew without a family just because people who wanted them, they were gay parents, they were single parents. Think about it. At that time, which it hasn't been that long, but thinking about if you're a single parent, you are not a parent. If
Yeah.
you're a couple that is not, couple
If
from
you're a person of color, if you don't have certain privileges, right? Perceived
I
privileges.
got to see that. So it's not, it's not so far ago. I got to see that. And it was some of those things were the things that began me to question. And it was like, but why? Why? This
Yeah, I went through the same thing. So I mean, it's interesting because I can resonate. I'm oldest of a sibling family, and when I was just 19 years old, I was in court fighting for custody for my siblings. There's four of them,
hmm
and the idea was you couldn't possibly. And I know I was young and ahead of myself, right? But I was employed. I had the space. I had the
and you
intention. I had the
probably
love,
were more capable than everybody else. And
right? So yeah, it
you
turns
know,
out I was in
it's
comparison to
it's
other
like
family
why.
members.
Right.
But
Why
yeah,
do
this is
we
this
lock
is important.
ourselves in these things instead of looking at the reality?
Yes. Yes. And then what do these kids go through when we make decisions for them like someone doesn't deserve to parent them, right? When they grow up without parents. It's a whole generation of children, like you said, which
Exactly.
is interesting because I wanted to ask you, you know, you've been working in mental health for longer than I've been alive.
Yes.
And so we're talking to a grandmaster, y'all. Pay attention. Have you noticed that folks as a society, collective consciousness, right? Generally speaking, your opinion, have you noticed that things are getting better? Or do you see a reoccurrence or more instances of mental illness across the board?
It's interesting. Um, I what I see is sort of the scale going like this. It goes up and it goes down and it goes up, and then it goes down for kind of a while because of things and people that are out there that they're spreading the good word, they're opening the doors, et cetera, et cetera. But whenever there is a crisis, there is something that always scares me, and I'm not one to get scared easy. But it scares me because people tend to go back into the shell, like those hermit crabs.
Yeah.
Is danger. People go back. So people tend to, even if it's for a little while, to kind of go back to those old patterns. And it's almost like they forgot how damaging it was. They forgot how uninclusive it was. They
Yep.
forgot how you're actually severing important things from your life and from your human path. Thank God they don't go as far back as they were before. But it's like, 6 steps this way and then 2 back. But it's still 2 back. It's like,
Yeah, we digress, right?
yeah, yeah.
And it's
So,
interesting because when we're fearful as humans, we don't think the way we normally would. We don't have clarity.
yeah,
We operate on a compulsion, right? We start to like just do things because we're
right.
trying to find a safe, comfortable space. And
Yes,
oftentimes that reactivity is more damaging than if you just took a breath, stood back, and re-examined what the challenge was.
mhm,
Because oftentimes we really we make things bigger than what they are, and we're
yeah,
so I heard a saying once that changed my whole perspective on life, and it was don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff,
yeah,
all of it,
yeah,
because in all actuality, tomorrow's not promised for any of us. Yet we live like we're gonna live forever, and we don't take into account the beauty of each moment that we are alive.
sure,
As a result, right, we miss out
sure,
on the present moment.
sure. And,
So,
and
what
this is
would you?
why I'm sorry, this is why it's important, these things that you're doing, because 30 years ago, this would be unheard of. So either,
Yeah, I'd be a crazy trying to talk
yes,
about mental, right?
yes, yes. It's like, how would you reach? the audience that you're reaching now at that point, because a lot of people, and I'm going to tell you, and this is the truth, and people could ask their parents, like when people announce that a psychologist was going to talk, they would get up. This was the time to go to the bathroom. This was the time to go,
That's all
unless
those
you
defense
really had an
mechanisms. Don't look
interest.
at it. Don't pay attention to it. Get stuff there.
Exactly. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
he's gonna talk about mumbo jumbo. He's gonna talk about like all these weird things, you know. And it was
He's gonna
interesting
talk to
because I
crazy people, and I'm not crazy. Yeah.
exactly,
Right.
exactly,
We all got a little crazy in there somewhere. We're human.
exactly.
So yeah, no, but this is important, folks. Don't run from yourself, right? There's insight when you pay attention. When you look in the mirror, there's not only beauty there, whether or not you see it, but you have a light that's in you, a soul purpose. That when you get past those onion layers, like Laviena said, then you wind up finding not only that you cry because the onion will make you cry, but
Yeah.
but it's good. It'll release the energy. You get to the core of yourself and you realize the root of the beauty that was all those layers, right? And some of those layers were serving you, some of them weren't. But you won't know until you start peeling that onion back. I'm speaking metaphorically for those of you who can't keep up. Pay attention to yourself. Notice what's going on with you, and you'll see the good things that are within you. Try to focus on those. Everything else is nonsense. It doesn't serve you. So let it go.
And Eddie, I want to share this with you. It's really funny. I was once doing a show, and there was an eye doctor next to me, and I was talking precisely about, people allow yourself to cry, allow
Yes.
yourself to be sad, allow yourself to feel what you feel. And the eye doctor said to me, it was really funny. I always remember this. He said, and whenever you cry, the white of your eyes gets whiter, so your eyes will be prettier. I remember, I was like, oh, I never thought about that. I never thought about that. So allow yourself to be to cry, even if it's for a superfluous thing as to have prettier eyes. There you go. There is a purpose for things. There's a purpose for crying. It cleanses not only your soul, but it cleanses the white of your eyes.
That's right. Crying, there's nothing wrong with it, especially for men out there, right? We're taught that men are not supposed to cry.
That's right. That's
And
right.
we're human.
You have to be a real man to be able to cry.
Which is yes. And you know what? You have to be a real human to be
Yes.
able to feel things, right? Take away gender, take away, race, take away all the things that we put on top of the human condition to try to categorize and filter out and put what we like and not like. Take all that stuff away. At the end of the day, you are wired to produce tears and to feel emotions and to process those things. That's what makes us beautiful and intricate as human beings. But that is energy being released. So don't worry about crying. In fact, welcome it. If you feel things coming up, notice why it's there. Notice what you're letting go of. And then feel it, but let it go. Some of us keep crying and crying and crying and crying and crying. And that's where you have to okay, get it together.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But don't hold on to things that don't serve you. And that means exploring the stuff that makes you cry, letting it go, and moving on to better things. Yes?
And this is really what you said is beautiful. This is really important because it has to do with being in tune with yourself. Because if you're in tune with yourself, you'll know when to cry and you'll know when to stop crying. Because if you lose perspective with one way or another, either you don't want to cry or you cry all the time, those are two extremes. They don't exist in nature. Those extremes, nature is balanced and
everything is balanced. Yep.
Yes. So you know what? If you listen to yourself, you'll know when to cry and you'll know when to stop crying. You know to say, okay, it's enough. Now it's time to smile. It's time to do something different.
Yeah. It's time to feel good again.
Right? Yes.
Feel good. Life is too short. Let's smile, baby. So, what lessons have you learned, Louis, in all your years working with humans in the human condition? What are some of the gems you could give folks that they don't need to spend 30 plus years dealing with mental health and people and their problems to get? What have you learned? The biggest gems.
The biggest gems is that we need to learn to be nicer to ourselves. It's really interesting because we spend a lifetime, school and church and society and everywhere, trying to learn to be nice to other people. But nobody spends more than 2 minutes teaching you how to be nice to yourself. So I think that it's so important to be caring, to be loving,
Mm-hmm.
and to be somebody able to nurture who you are and
Yes.
nurture what's in you. That is, I would say, that's pivotal. That's the cornerstone for living a good life, living a good place.
Listen to this, folks. What he is saying is what I try to tell y'all every day. You have to love yourself.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
cannot love anything in life if you don't love yourself. You have to be comfortable with the person you are. This is the golden rule to success, right?
Yep.
Everything else flows when you know that you are limitless, light, love, and potentiality. You are beautifully unique. Some of us hate certain aspects of ourselves when in fact, I can guarantee you, just by nature of balance, right? There are others who will agree with you in what your perceived flaws are, and there are a whole slew of people who will see your flaws as beautiful.
Yes.
And it will love those aspects of you, irregardless of your ability to do so and see so, right? So so just love yourself, right? Just
Yes.
love yourself.
Th-
When in doubt, am I loving myself right now?
Yeah.
No,
That's
so
a
I have to
great
do something
question.
different. Yes.
That's a great question. Am I loving myself now? I'm
Yes.
going to steal that from you.
Yes. What is the story I'm telling myself,
Yes.
right? This is
Yes.
important. We've always got this negative, this narrative going on upstairs. Oh, look at the beautiful trees. Oh, look at Dr. Laviena. Oh, look, we're on the Leche podcast. Oh, look, more stimuli. Oh, I gotta do this.
Yeah.
I gotta pay this bill. I gotta call this person. And it's just madness upstairs, right? But when we look at it and we just notice that's what it is, it's simply just the mind trying to
Sure.
find comfort, trying to find balance, trying to be ahead of the game to
Mhm.
avoid pain, to avoid disappointment, to avoid suffering, rejection, all the perceived negative vibrations of the life experience. But they're all a part of balance, right? You can't always have everything too positive, and you can't always be so negative. If you can acknowledge that both of them bring you to this place of homeostasis, of balance, of peace, of nirvana, of enlightenment, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
there's so much wealth in that,
It's part of
folks.
that human experience,
That's
you
right.
know?
You don't have to go paying thousands and thousands of dollars to see celebrity psychologists. I'm not trying to mess up your business, Louis. You got it. You good. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars to deal with a meditation coach,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
what you can do is free 99 in the mirror and go, I love you. I
Yes.
love you.
Yes.
I
Yes.
forgive you for not knowing better, but now you know better. And so now you're going to do better.
Yes. Yes, definitely. That's your best investment, yourself. It's
Absolutely.
your best investment because you know what? When you're good with yourself, you're good with everybody because you do things with a smile. You share. It's easy to share. It's easy to do things because you spread happiness. You spread good things. When you're mean to yourself, you can't be good to anybody else
Nope.
because it's either hypocritical or you're doing it with an ulterior motive or whatever. And those things don't.
Energy transfers. People can smell bullshit. You
Oh
running around
yes.
feeling like shit, trying to pretend like everything is great. You're
Oh yeah.
going to make people feel like shit.
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
Because it transfers. We're like big antennas. I always tell folks we're projecting information and
Yeah.
receiving information constantly. And our energy speaks so much more loudly than our vocal ability, right?
Sure.
Some of us are screaming at other people without even opening their mouths
Yeah.
because they are so heavy. And these are the people that when you meet them, you're like, I don't know if I should say hi or what. You just feel that, right? You can
I,
feel that.
I had a friend in the field who used to say that we are all like a foreign movie. We have subtitles, and it doesn't matter what we say. Learn to read those subtitles.
That's right. You turn on Telemundo, you don't speak Spanish, but you see somebody, tú eres desgraciada. You
Yes,
know there's drama there. You know there's drama there. You don't know what the fuck they're talking about, but
but
you know that
but
some shit is going on that's not good.
exactly, exactly.
So, speaking of Telemundo, speaking of success, you have achieved great notoriety and success. When you Google you're all over the place, right? You have a lot of achievements. For you, what are some of the greatest highlights? What is the biggest first thing that comes to mind in terms of Luis Laviena's success in this experience called life?
Okay,
He
that's
said
that's
so many. Let me see. Let me go to the filing cabinet.
I've also have had a lot of opportunities, and I've been blessed in doing that, because even though it's been hard and it's been kind of like trailblazing, opening
Uphill battle, so to
things.
speak.
Yes, uphill, a lot of uphill. But I have talking about embracing yourself. One of my qualities is that I am as stubborn as hell.
Mm.
So I use that, instead of taking the negative side, I use it as a positive side. And I could think about things, the whole um, dealing with racism on TV. People so scared of that. Talking about homosexuality on TV. People, you know, you say that to producers, and unless you are to present a show that it's dramatic and does all these things, they don't want to touch it. They don't want to deal with the human conversation of it.
Mm.
Dealing with illness, let's say during AIDS. So one of the biggest achievements that I think that I've had was kind of carving into Spanish TV and saying, we either talk about this or I'm not coming anymore.
Mm.
And
Good for
yeah,
you.
yeah, it
Yeah,
was it
because
was
you
it
know
was
what?
tough. I
Opportunity.
had to hold my breath.
Yeah, if you can't feel what you're doing, if it's not love, energy, community, healing, and
Yeah,
empowerment, there's no leche in it,
yeah,
then you can't do it.
yeah.
And
It's
and a
like,
lot of us are just looking for money and opportunity, and we sell
yeah,
our souls as a result, right? Metaphorically speaking, we
sure,
buy
to make
into
things
the
pretty.
drama.
It's like, oh, you can't talk about this because blah blah blah. No, no, no. There is a problem. We need to address it. And you know what? I bet you, which was interesting, because once it was out there, a lot of people jumped on it.
Mm.
So even they were surprised of how much interest it generated, because there was a lot of people who were waiting for somebody else to say it, to be the
Mm.
first one to kind of like almost
Yes.
step into those grounds that nobody wanted to step in. So that was definitely, I think that was one of the biggest ones. Being able to say, we need to be sitting here and making decisions because this is my community and I know my community. Nobody
Yes.
from outside knows what I'm going through like me, because this is me. I need to have a voice.
Yeah.
I need to have the power of deciding what things, which is interesting because there's an election coming, so please vote.
Yes. Vote. You say something that you hit it on the nose. I want to touch this because we haven't necessarily, on Leche, I like to keep things positive. I haven't necessarily touched racism, homosexuality, things
Mhm.
like that. But these are realities that are going on right now. So, in reference to the whole Black Lives Matter movement and into the whole homosexuality rights and all the sort of big traumas that we have. Yes, I love that mask. Um, something that he said that's significant, that you said is significant, and I want to touch it. Television. A lot of us look to the tube for inspiration, for entertainment, for truth, right? And you have to be selective with the content that you're ingesting, the content that you're taking in, because there are beautiful people like Dr. Laviena who want to come on the television and talk to you about real life things, but that's not what sells. Unfortunately, what we're mostly subscribed to is drama. We're subscribed to hate and fighting and
Sure.
competition and egocentric topics, right? That feed the ego. And if you know anything about ego, you know that it is not good for you to feed your ego.
Mhm.
Okay? In fact, it is the exact opposite. Ego is poisonous, right? We want to avoid being egotistical. So when it comes to racism, when it comes to any sort of oppression, segregation, labeling, judging, blaming, shaming, we should really steer clear of involving ourselves heavily in that and accepting these things as truths. What
Sure.
am I saying? I'm saying there are ads. You just mentioned voting, so I'll make this about politics. I don't like to get into politics because politics have a lot of heavy emotion
Sure.
attached to them,
Sure.
because we're subscribed to these things, right? I'm excluding myself from this because I have no emotion when it comes to politics other than You folks need to just get a clear perspective, slow down, stop fighting, stop subscribing to this and that. Nobody's perfect. These people are spending millions and millions of dollars to pump information to you that will buy you in.
Yeah.
That does not mean that it is truth, that is good for you, that is going to feed you or serve you. It is just stimulating emotions, just throwing emotional fucking impact at the community, and we are all buying into these things
Yeah.
just mindlessly.
Is they're
So
feeding on
we
your fears, they're feeding on your prejudices. They're feeding,
absolutely.
and this is where it's important for you, as you said, stop, think, and act, because is your neighborhood, is your family, is your
Mm.
education. So all of those things you really need to think, because they're going to be impacted.
Yes, and you know what, folks? Let's talk about this, because homosexuality not only is a drama, and we talked about that,
Hmm.
but it's generalizing whole entire populations of people. You have to be mindful about judging, blaming, shaming colors,
Hmm.
shapes,
Hmm.
backgrounds, cultures,
Sure.
because there is no one size fits all. I have met black people who feel like they're rejected from the black community,
Right, right,
right?
right,
This is profound insights waiting for you. Speak to people, educate yourself on an
right.
individual level. There is no Latino that subscribes to everything Latino.
Yes.
There are non-Latinos who subscribe to things Latino. And it just keeps going, right? So be mindful of generalization. Anytime that you say anything about a group of people, know that your statement is ignorant. It's
Yes. Yes.
ignorant. It's
Yes.
coming from a place of ignorance, judging, shaming, and blaming. And you can do a lot better than that. I know
Yes.
you can.
Yes.
Yes, you can.
Yes. 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 Listen, we've been, as a human race, we've been here thousands and thousands of years. It's time that we begin to move in the right direction.
Right.
Remember that
Drama
scale
has
that they used to have
sold.
in school, that like the monkey was here and here was the human? It's like, I feel whenever I hear some of these things, like people go like backwards, and that scale is like, really? Come
De-evolution. Yes.
on.
All
It's
the way
like, really?
de-evolving. Mm-hmm. We made so much strides in technology, yet we aren't comfortable with ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We are pushing into space, yet we really know Earth. Like, let's really just be mindful about.
We have an issue with a woman leading a thing. Listen, a lot of people are raised by women. You fit.
You came out of
They
a
carry
woman.
you. They carry you. You want something more powerful than that?
You
You
came
can't
out of a
trust
woman,
your
baby.
life to a woman who carried you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, give me a break. You
Yep.
know?
We
It's
can
like,
do better. Don't generalize. Don't hate people you don't know. Some of the biggest, most beautiful people you'll ever meet will challenge your oppositions towards their demographic groups. So, and you know, I'm speaking from personal. Growing up Latino, you know, I was raised same deal as a Latin. You know, you don't mess with other cultures. You stick to, and this is just personal stuff that was passed to me, not necessarily by my parents, but just the understandings, right? And the systemic racism, like stay away from
the
morenos.
subtitles. The
Yeah,
subtitles.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly. And so you're like, you get these narratives in your head about people, but then you meet folks who completely destroy those narratives.
Right.
Some of us will reject those people and reject those truths to continue to support the voice of the mind.
Sure.
That's ignorance, that's bigotry, that's racism, right? That's homophobia.
Hmm.
We are speaking love, energy, community, healing, empowerment. We are higher vibrations, right? We are in a different time now. You've got to think better than that. Spend time with people in perceived limitation. So like what I'm trying to say is find someone in your target group. If you hate a certain group of people, I
Yeah.
challenge you to start a conversation with someone and ask them
Nice.
questions. Learn about these people. They have feelings, they have emotions, they're human like you, they have fears, they have needs, they have desires, but they're also trying to figure this thing out called life. You are no exception to that rule. Transcend. Love it. Let's go. Transcend leche.
There you it's really interesting. I'm going to give you a little bit of my experience. My grandmother used to say that whenever you act like that against somebody that you're basically pointing your finger, look at it. One finger is pointing this way, but there's three pointing at you. So you're talking about yourself. So if you're dealing with hate, if you're dealing with prejudice, if you're dealing with homophobia, if you're dealing with all these things, those are things that are coming from you. They're not coming
Yep.
from that person.
Yep.
They're coming from you.
And you feel them, and they're toxic,
Yes.
and they're not
Yes.
healthy for you. That's why they make you feel bad. So while you're externalizing that feeling and saying, "Oh no, it's Lewis's fault. He made me feel this." No, it's not. You feel it. You're the one feeling it. Lewis has no idea you're feeling it. Lewis
That's
is in
right.
Lewis's world.
That's right. Lewis is
Right?
not that powerful.
And you're just like festering in negativity. Let
Yeah.
them go.
Yeah.
Let them go. Wish them peace. There's a meditation form called
exactly.
meta meditation, love and kindness. Just picture the people that you have the most issues with in your mind and send them love, send them peace, send them tranquility, ascension, clarity, all the things that you need to let go of that bad energy, because the only person that's hurting is you.
You. Perfect.
What would you say, Doc, to anybody who's struggling with mental illness right now?
I think this is a very important time in the world, and it's a point that, because of the isolation and because of all these things, it's a little harder to connect. So what used to be so easy that you could go, I'm sure there was a lot of people right now who are hitting their heads and saying, gee, there was a clinic right here in the corner and I never went. And now I'm going crazy. The clinic is closed. It's almost like it's a time to open up and begin to nurture what we have, the resources that we have, podcasts like yours, communication with other people, communication with different entities. Use technology to connect, which is one of the things that has happened. It's like now, we are connecting through the internet. We are doing this connection that in the past that would be unheard of.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you talk about this with
I would have never been able to get Dr. Laviena in the past. Ever. I would have sent letters. I would have made phone calls, but my people wouldn't have been in touch with his people.
Eddie, for you would get me. You would get me.
I appreciate you, brother. Yeah, this is true, folks. This is a good time to sort of recenter, reconnect. A lot of people are like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do," and I'm like, "Enjoy it," because just a few months ago, folks were like, "I hate my job. I wish I had time off. The grass is always fucking greener on the other side." And here I am on the other side of the grass, complaining that it's not as green. Right?
And you get to appreciate everything. The other day I had the most interesting conversation with this woman who was always complaining about her kid's teacher. And now that she has them at home, she's going nuts. And she's telling me like, oh, this and that. And I was like, well, maybe you should give a call to the teacher and have a conversation about what did she do when they were doing these things. And it was interesting. She said, I feel bad about calling her because I was always bitching whenever she would put extra work or she would try to block him from doing this and doing that. So you know what? It's a little bit about walking in the other person's shoes, and this problem is now our problem. Is everybody's problem.
Yes, and you said something else that just you're touching stuff I want to touch. I love it. Folks, this whole parenting thing. Newsflash. Your children are your responsibility. Okay? I love you so much. Okay? And you're doing the best that you can. But it is not your teacher's responsibility to teach you how to parent your child. Furthermore, your child is a reflection of you. Okay? They have learned how to think, act, feel, and project like you have. You're their only frame of reference, okay, for the first few years. So when your child can't stay still, ask yourself, are you still? Are you teaching what it's like to be still? This whole old school, do as I say, not as I do approach doesn't work. It doesn't work. Okay, this whole adults do this, kids do that. Reality check. Your kids are paying attention to you, and when they turn into adults, whatever your adulting is what their adulting is going to look like. Okay,
Right.
so for example, you smoke cigarettes around your kid your whole life. Your kid is going to be a smoker, and
Sure.
it is not their fault that they couldn't be strong enough to know something different when all they learned at home was how to cope through cigarettes. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
small example, profound insight here waiting to happen. You
Yes.
want still kids, still yourself. You want to learn how to connect, look in the mirror and figure out why they're disconnected, because the disconnectivity was taught by you. Okay, love you so much. This is from
That
a place of good.
that is so powerful. It's those are pieces of gold. It's like really. It's like what was it? I remember reading somewhere that 1 minute of your example has more power than 22 hours of your words. So
Mm.
1 minute of your example stays in kids' head more than all these hours of you talking about.
Yes. And so many kids, too, having to play the role of adults. Look into family systems theory, folks. Look into rules, roles, and boundary. Look at whether or not your child is picking up some of the adult slack because you're not,
Yeah,
right? These are realities, right? Children are supposed to be children. They don't need to learn to be responsible right away. They need to learn how to be human first,
right,
right? And that
right.
takes great empathy, patience, and great examples for mentorship in the form of parenting.
Yes, yes.
So, we have 3 minutes left. This flew by fast.
It
So I definitely have to have you come back on because we are everything mindfulness.
will be
And
my honor.
yes, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you on, folks. Follow Luis Laviena. Check out his work. He's Googleable. He's been in the game longer than I've been alive. We got a legend on. I'm so honored to have you here. Is there anything that you want to say to folks as they're watching now before we let them go?
Take advantage of every minute and every instance of your life because
Mm.
it might not be there tomorrow. Places like you, things like what you're doing now, it's unbelievable. I mean, like people from my generation, we look back and we would have never imagined that this would be possible. So this is accessibility.
Mm.
This is, putting you in connection with the rest of the people. Keep up the good work. Again, you're doing God's work,
You
and
too, Pop.
and people take advantage of this. Listen, think,
Be
think.
kind to yourself.
Yes. And
Love
thank you
yourself.
for having me here.
Thank you so much, Laviena. I always leave folks with namaste. Know that the divine light in me acknowledges and respects the divine light in you. And folks, if you're watching, show us love. Let us know what you thought about this discussion. Did any of this stuff resonate with you, right? Follow Dr. Laviena, follow myself, and Leche We Are. And I want you to know, as I always do before I let you go, that you are limitless. Light, love, and potentiality, whether or not you choose to believe that you are. Okay, so follow that and everything else will flow. Be kind to yourself and others. We love you. Thank you again, Dr. Laviena. Everyone have a beautiful Sunday. Light and love, baby. Leche.
Yes.
Blessings. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Take care.